more about your property. Like, why did you choose this property to make your forever home?
Back in the late 1980s, I was looking where would I go to move for my first real home, a home that I buy and grow up in and live in. And I knew Miami pretty well by then because I already lived here for 20 years. And I found a property that was next to the hospitals I worked at, and yet that had a history, agricultural history. Mm-hmm. And the property we're in now is in a community which is called Sunset Grove, but is more importantly an avocado and mango grove dating 105 years ago.
Oh, wow.
So the deed goes back that far. And for that measure, Hurricane Andrew, when it did come, knocked down a lot of the avocados, which were smaller and more fragile than some of the mangoes. The mangoes that were planted in 1916, one in particular in the back of the property, is the national champion mango tree for the United States. And there are tens of thousands of mangoes through the Gulf Coast, California, Texas. And this particular tree, through the Division of Forestry, they have a measuring system for what they call champion trees, the largest of their kind in the country. And so in fact, the largest mango tree in the country is in our backyard here. But that's a testament to where and how they grow in a naturalized setting. The nice part about where we are, and the reason it was used agriculturally over 100 years ago, is again going back to water. You're situated right now in the Everglades natural ecosystem, which is an abundance of fresh water. Drill down only 30 feet, we can pull out potable, drinkable fresh water, which is unique, and the importance of fresh water and the availability of it throughout the world is a real problem. We have an abundance of it. And so I capitalize on that through the plants, which really do benefit from it. In this property, there's ancient oak trees that would have been here when this area, before any of South Florida was developed, would have been considered as an oak hammock. What's an oak hammock? It's an area where all throughout the year, its elevation is just a little higher than the surrounding areas of the Everglades, which stay wet, especially in the summertime. So in fact, in all of those years, we never have had flood encroachment of water here because we're on a little elevated area, but yet we're inland by a few miles. That's the difference with getting not only saltwater intrusion from what you could pull out from underground, but when the rare storms come along and they bring a storm surge and wash the entire landscape with saltwater, seawater, that becomes something that the plants are not accustomed to. Now, coconut palms, sure, they're coastal. But where I'm situated here, I can grow probably more varieties of plants than anywhere in the country outside of Hawaii. So for the continental United States, and by the way, not master gardens, but the champion trees that are designated are for the 48 contiguous United States. Hawaii is a little different than the Barents Sea that way.
Your mango tree, you said that one was the most flavorful one, right?
No, actually, one next to it is the flavorful one. Yeah, mangoes have evolved since David Fairchild, the namesake, who Fairchild is named after in his honor. He was president of the National Geographic Society, an explorer and an author, and an excellent plantsman who brought in several commercial plants and fruits to South Florida over 100 years ago. One of them, mangoes. That varietal that is the champion tree is a Hayden mango, which doesn't tend to be necessarily today among either the sweetest, and it certainly has more fiber in the fruit compared to ones that are smooth and maybe more flavorful. The ones that I have, though, that are my personal favorite is called Cogshell. And the reason I'm mentioning that is you won't find that in the grocery stores, because as good as the fruit is, the outside skin, any handling will cause bruising on it. So people don't see it in the store shelf as a nice, perfectly red, green, yellow mango, but they'll see some purplish marks on it from bruising. It's just one of the genetic differences, but people don't tend to eat mango fruit anyway. It's a distant cousin, believe it or not, and has certain toxins in it that some people can be very much allergic, especially if they eat it. So we cut that away and we savor the delicious fruit underneath. And the same thing with the avocados that are here. But that's how this began over 100 years ago, as Florida was developing and largely being recognized for its agricultural benefits, being at this latitude so south, having fresh water, And the other thing that's wonderful about this area is that Miami has some of the cleanest air of any major city in the country.
Oh,
And
wow.
that's because the southeast breezes coming in off of the Gulf Stream keep us well ventilated. So
Wow.
for growing conditions, one thing is the temperature, one thing is the waterfall. Another thing, of course, is the air movement.
Yeah.
Put those things together and complement it with good light, and those are the 4 essential growing components that will make any gardener better if you know what your particular setting has to offer.
What are your favorite plants on your property?
Probably whichever one I'm with at that moment. I tend to show interest in different plant families and groups. There's a motto of master gardeners throughout the United States. Master gardener programs, by the way, are programs through the agricultural extension offices that all states have. They're usually county specific, but the master gardener's mantra is the right plant in the right place. So it comes down to, where am I in the garden?
Yeah.
Because a garden isn't only one place. A garden, when you learn to interact with it, have what are called microclimates, little niche areas where the light, the ventilation, the humidity, the temperature, those things may be subtly different to you, but to a plant it could be tremendously different. If in certain areas, I know that ferns like to grow. I tend to like the look right now of maidenhair ferns. They come in different sizes and shapes, and yet they're not the common ones that people regard as being weedy ferns per se. So ferns I find fascinating. Aroids are fascinating because they're so varied, tremendous in one plant family, to cover things ranging from the anthuriums that I like because the leaves tend to be large, leathery, velvety, at least the kind that I like to grow.
Mm-hmm.
There's bird's nest anthuriums, but I'm known more for the velvety leaf type, the larger ones, and I find those to be quite satisfying because once the leaf matures, it's not like other, say, alocaceas or colocaceas where the leaf tissue structure is kind of flimsy. It actually gets a leathery feel to it. And but those are just examples. Ferns, aroids. I grow orchids, bromeliads I've been real big with, and I think we took a few pictures earlier so you can see what those look like. Then there's a lot of oddballs, things that don't fall into any general big family, and sometimes those are the most fascinating because those are the ones that are not as wide known or as widespread. But sometimes the flowers on those are fascinating, and they include sometimes succulents. I think we looked at a few different cacti flowers today, which in detail are fascinating to me because when I see those flowers and I realize that they're not pollinated by a bee or a butterfly or even a small little insect, they're very often pollinated by flies. And so as pretty as the flower looks like, the other thing that flowers have is scents very often. Those don't tend to be particularly pleasant for us, but if you smelled like carrion or something rotting, then it might just attract the fly pollinator. One thing is the smell, but the other thing are sometimes the ornate patterns that are in some plants. So we looked at a few cacti flowers earlier today, which is amazing to me because whatever insect looks at that, you realize that through eons, that plant has evolved to find something that magically works for where it comes from, that attracts the insect pollinator that it's trying to work with. So plant chemistry also is something that I have a tremendous amount of respect for the power of plants' chemicals and how they influence their environment.
Master gardening has been brought up several times. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. Well, the name master has certain connotations too, but all states and counties have agricultural extension programs through the departments of agriculture. That is generally a voluntary program, which is designed to educate individuals, ideally who are from one particular county in the state, to give them the basis for how to grow plants best. And a lot of this started agriculturally for commerce 100 to 200 years ago, even as agriculture was developing throughout the United States. That Master Gardener program then trains individuals regularly to be volunteer experts of the plants that are in their community to share with the people in that community who want to know how to do it better. It's easy to kill plants. I've killed plants. I don't kill them quite as much as I used to, but that's part of the learning experience. Those volunteers are there to make sure, in their best ability, that the training that they offer citizens, and they get the first training themselves, from the experts within that particular agricultural extension office. It's about helping a collegial farmer succeed at what they're trying to do. And it's not just not kill a plant, but it's make the best use of it, whether it's a commercial application or even food crops. These are all things that rely on human agriculture, and the supporting science hopefully is what's taught, not only about how to sustain the plants, but about climate condition, deforestation issues, things like that. Those issues involving global warming and concerns with how to mitigate against what happens even season to season or state to state is where Master Gardener programs succeed. And as I said before, where to put a plant to grow is as important as how to grow it. So again, the mantra of Master Gardeners is the right plant in the right place.